I'd like now to proceed to the presentation from CNSC staff as outlined CMD 17H2.B and 2.C. Mr. Frappier, you may proceed.
Merci. Bonjour, Monsieur le Président et membres de la Commission. Je m'appelle Jerry Frappier, je suis le directeur général de la Direction de la réglementation des centrales nucléaires. With me today is Mr. Ben Poulet, Director of the Gentilly II and Point Lepreau Regulatory Program Division, and Mr. Lee Casterton, Senior Regulatory Program Officer of the same division. The CNSC Site Office Supervisor, Mr. Burton Volpe, as well as CNSC inspectors are also here today. We're also joined by CNSC technical support staff who are either here or listening from Ottawa to any questions the Commission may have. I would point out that due to the floods happening in the Ottawa-Gatineau area, there is a bit of, some are at the CNSC in Ottawa and some are at home in Gatineau. So there may be a little bit of technical sort of issues on some of those questions and answers. Finally, I would like to acknowledge the staff from the other federal and provincial governments, as you mentioned earlier, that are also here to provide technical support. It's our pleasure to be here today in the City of St. John's for Part 2 of this hearing, which greatly facilitates the in-person participation of the local community members and representatives that are either directly involved or very interested in the activities associated with the operation of Point Lepreau Nuclear Generating Station. The staff presentation today will highlight information found in CMD 17H2 and will provide an overview of the purpose of the hearing and of the Point Lepreau facility, the many steps of the CNSC license renewal process, how the CNSC maintains regulatory oversight of the nuclear facilities, the results of the CNSC staff assessment of the past safety performance of Point Lepreau, and other matters of regulatory interest, the proposed license and license condition handbook, and finally the CNSC staff conclusions and recommendations. We'll begin with a review of the purpose of this two-part Commission hearing. The purpose of this Commission hearing is to consider the license renewal application for the Point Lepreau Power Reactor Operating License submitted by New Brunswick Power in June of 2016. Part 1 of the Commission hearing was held in Ottawa on January 26, 2017. Part 2 of the Commission hearing begins today and provides an opportunity for First Nation groups and the public to participate through both written and oral intervention. New Brunswick Power is requesting a license renewal for a period of 5 years. I will now pass the presentation over to Mr. Ben Poulet, who will provide an overview of the Point Lepreau station and the New Brunswick Power license application.
Thank you, Mr. Frappier. Monsieur le Président, members of the Commission, my name is Ben Poulet. I'm the Director of the Gentilly II and Point Lepreau Regulatory Program Division. Je m'appelle Ben Poulet et je suis le directeur du programme de réglementation des centrales de Gentilly II et Point Lepreau. It is my pleasure to be here in St. John today, or this week, for Part 2 of this hearing. We will begin this part of the staff presentation with an overview of the Point Lepreau site. The Point Lepreau site is owned and operated by the New Brunswick Power Corporation, a Canadian corporation whose head office is located in Fredericton, New Brunswick. The Point Lepreau nuclear facilities are located on the Lepreau Peninsula, approximately 40 kilometers southwest of the city of St. John. The site is home to a nuclear electrical generating station and a solid radioactive waste management facility, which is designed to store the radioactive waste produced by the generating station. The generating station consists of a single 705 megawatt CANDU reactor unit, which came into service in 1983. The Point Lepreau reactor underwent a major refurbishment starting in 2008 and returned to commercial operation in November of 2012. The current Point Lepreau Power Reactor operating license expires on June 30th, 2017. CNSC staff notes the current license covered the activities required to return the station to commercial operation following completion of the refurbishment in 2012. The current license also covers the operation of the solid radioactive waste management facility, the activities associated with nuclear substances and prescribed equipment, as well as a limited number of import and export activities. The proposed license is for the 5-year period commencing on July 1st, 2017 and expiring on June 30th, 2022. It covers the same activities NB Power is currently licensed to carry out. Keeping in mind the purpose of this hearing, we will now provide an overview of the many steps which constitutes the CNSC license renewal process for power reactors. As can be seen on this slide, the CNSC license renewal process for existing power reactors is quite extensive and takes approximately 2 years to complete. The process begins with confirming the CNSC regulatory requirements associated with the license renewal process. These were officially communicated to NB Power on November 4th, 2015. This was followed up in February of 2016 when CNSC staff provided the list of new and updated CNSC regulatory documents and CSA standards that would be included in the licensing basis. These, along with the already established regulatory requirements, had to be addressed by NB Power in the Point Lepreau license renewal application and as well as in the supporting documentation. The Point Lepreau license renewal application was submitted by NB Power on June 20th, 2016. CNSC staff conducted a technical assessment of the NB Power application to confirm all requirements were addressed. This CNSC staff assessment was completed on August 11, 2016, and it concluded additional information was required. NB Power provided all of the required additional information on September 2nd, 2016. CNSC staff completed the review and concluded the NB Power license application met all of the regulatory requirements. CNSC staff then prepared CMD 17-H2, which documents the CNSC staff assessment and conclusions, and submitted it to the Commission Secretariat on December 28, 2016. The Commission conducts a 2-part public hearing to consider the application. Part 1 of the hearing was held in Ottawa on January 26, 2017, while Part 2 of the hearing is being conducted this week here in the City of St. John. The public and First Nation people are invited to participate either in writing or in person following Part 1 of the hearing. The Commission will consider all of the information presented either in writing or in person during the hearing before it renders its decision on the license renewal of the Point Lepreau nuclear generating station. CMD 17-H2 presents the CNSC staff conclusions and recommendations for consideration by the Commission during the 2-part hearing. CMD 17-H2 not only focuses on the CNSC staff review of the NB Power license renewal application, but also includes a review of the following: the NB Power safety performance over the current licensing period for all of the 14 safety and control areas, the acceptability and applicability and implementation of new and updated CSA standards and CNSC regulatory documents, the results of the ongoing compliance verification activities conducted by CNSC staff, and the status of the ongoing corrective actions and improvement initiatives being implemented by NB Power. The CNSC introduced periodic safety reviews, known as PSRs, to the regulatory framework in April of 2015. NB Power previously completed an integrated safety review, or ISR for short, which was the precursor to the PSR, in accordance with CNSC requirements. The ISR identified key safety improvements that were addressed during the refurbishment and life extension project for Point Lepreau. Both the ISR and PSR processes ensure periodic assessments are completed against modern codes, standards, and industry best practices. The goal is to identify reasonable and practical safety improvement opportunities. In accordance with the 10-year review cycle, NB Power will complete a PSR in accordance with Reg Doc 2.3.3 during the proposed license period. The PSR process requires NB Power submittal and CNSC staff acceptance of a PSR basis document, safety factor reports, a global assessment report, and an integrated implementation plan. PSRs are currently being conducted at all Canadian nuclear power plants and are an effective tool in achieving continuous improvements in safety performance. We will now focus on the CNSC staff regulatory oversight of the current operations at Point Lepreau. The CNSC has a clear and robust regulatory framework in place to ensure the continued safe operation of nuclear facilities. Regulatory oversight is maintained to ensure licensees operate in a safe manner in compliance with the requirements of the Nuclear Safety and Control Act, its regulations, as well as the Commission-approved license conditions. Regular inspections and evaluation verify that licensees are complying with the laws and regulations, as well as the conditions specified in their licenses. In this way, the CNSC can assure licensees are operating safely and adhering to regulatory requirements. Licensees are required to notify the CNSC of situations or events defined in CNSC regulatory document, Reg Doc 3.1.1, and to submit routine scheduled reports on a quarterly or annual basis to the CNSC on various topics. Compliance verification activities may be baseline or reactive, announced or unannounced, and scheduled or unscheduled. The compliance verification activities listed on this table provide CNSC staff with the means required to maintain regulatory oversight of the license activities across all safety and control areas, which will be covered later in this presentation. Type 1 and Type 2 inspections evaluate licensee programs and their outputs and outcomes. They consist of documentation reviews conducted in the CNSC headquarters, as well as on-site inspection activities conducted at Point Lepreau. Compliance desktop reviews also evaluate NB Power programs and their outputs, but are typically conducted by CNSC subject matter experts working in the CNSC headquarters in Ottawa without the conduct of any site inspection activity. Field inspections and surveillance and monitoring activities are typically conducted by CNSC site inspectors to collect compliance data, monitor the conduct of licensee activities, review station logs, and to identify any issue arising. CNSC staff also reviews unplanned events and scheduled reports submitted in accordance with Reg Doc 3.1.1 entitled Reporting Requirements for Nuclear Power Plants. The baseline compliance verification activities are determined based on areas that require or appear to require further licensee attention or licensee activities schedule dependent. For example, the conduct of an infrequently performed maintenance or testing activity may prompt CNSC staff in a site office or in Ottawa to conduct a reactive compliance verification activity. Additional planned and unplanned reactive compliance activities may also be conducted at any time to ensure regulatory oversight of any unexpected occurrences, such as a spill or the occurrence of unusually severe weather. In summary, CNSC staff has developed the means and the approach required to ensure regulatory oversight of the license activities is maintained under all conditions. During the last 5 years, from 2012 to 2016, the conduct of compliance verification activities by CNSC staff amounted to over 13,000 person days of effort. On the basis of these compliance verification activities, CNSC staff concludes NB Power continues to implement and maintain programs that meet CNSC regulatory requirements. CNSC staff has 74 baseline and reactive compliance verification activities planned for the current fiscal year. Among those are 4 key specific areas which were noted during Part 1 of this hearing. They are listed here to confirm the CNSC Compliance Verification Program maintains ongoing regulatory oversight of the NB Power safety performance in all key areas of interest, as explained in Part 1 of this hearing. Additionally, and as stated earlier, planned compliance activities do not limit in any way the ability of CNSC staff to conduct additional compliance activities should the need arise. NB Power is required to provide reports, notifications, and filing of specific records in accordance with CNSC regulatory documents Reg Doc 311 entitled Reporting Requirements for Nuclear Power Plants. NB Power notified the CNSC staff of all reportable events and submitted all performance report in accordance with CNSC regulatory reporting requirements. CNSC staff reviews all event initial reports and follow-up reports, as well as all compliance and safety performance reports, and keeps the Commission informed through regular status of power reactor update reports and the annual regulatory oversight report for Canadian nuclear power plants. The 2016 regulatory oversight report will be presented to the Commission in August of this year. The Commission will recall Part 1 of this hearing was held approximately 3.5 months ago. The Point Lepreau station operated on a continuous basis since then until April 8 of 2017, when Point Lepreau began a planned maintenance outage with a focus on improving equipment reliability. The main activities completed during the outage were maintenance on electrical systems and equipment, maintenance on nuclear process and safety systems, and maintenance of both the east and west fuel machine bridges. Compliance verification activities were conducted throughout the outage by CNSC site inspectors. CNSC site inspectors verified that operational activities conducted to change the plant status, proceed with the shutdown, cool down, and maintenance of equipment, and return to service were carried out safely and in accordance with approved procedures and practices. CNSC site inspectors also verified maintenance activities were conducted in a safe manner and in accordance with approved processes and procedures. The Commission will recall CNSC staff reported the need for NB Power to improve performance in the area of procedural adequacy and adherence during Part 1 of this hearing. CNSC staff has continued to monitor the NB Power progress in this area and has since confirmed an improving trend. We will now focus on the CNSC staff's safety performance assessment of the current operations at Point Lepreau. The performance assessments includes topics discussed during Part 1 of the Commission hearing and interventions submitted in Part 2 of this hearing. This slide presents the CNSC Safety Plant Performance Ratings for the Point Lepreau Nuclear Generating Station. As shown, Point Lepreau has received a satisfactory integrated plant rating each year from 2012 to 2016. CNSC staff notes the 2016 performance rating were not available in time for Part 1 of the hearing and are still anticipatory at this time, as the annual regulatory oversight report, which will include the final ratings, will be presented to the Commission in August of this year. CNSC staff is confident that NB Power will continue to operate Point Lepreau safely and that NB Power will continue to maintain and implement adequate programs and fulfill regulatory commitments during the proposed license period. During the current license period, from 2012 to today, CNSC staff verified the following. No worker or member of the public received a dose in excess of the regulatory dose limits, and all radiological releases were well below regulatory limits. The NB Power programs are implemented and maintained in accordance with regulatory requirements, and NB Power continues to make safety enhancements and improvements to the station. Overall, CNSC staff concludes NB Power has made adequate provision for the protection of workers, the public, and the environment. I will now turn over the presentation to Mr. Lee Casterton, who will provide more information on the CNSC staff safety performance assessment, as well as other matters of regulatory interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Poulet. Mr. President, members of the Commission, my name is Lee Casterton. I am a Senior Regulatory Program Officer with the Gentilly II and Point Lepreau Regulatory Program Division. Probabilistic Safety Assessment, known as PSA, is an analytical tool that complements deterministic safety analyses, which confirms the original design basis of the plant. The plant was designed using deterministic safety rules and proven engineering techniques and practices which considered defense in depth, radiation protection, and safety margins. CNSC staff have reviewed and accepted all of the deterministic safety analyses, which demonstrates all safety systems provide adequate coverage. In other words, the reactor will automatically shut down and be supplied with cooling for the fuel following a serious event. In terms of probabilistic safety assessment, CNSC staff have reviewed and accepted all methodologies and the PSA findings, including the Seismic PSA, the Integrated Overall PSA, and the PSA-based Seismic Margin Assessment. The results of these assessments will be presented in the next slides. CNSC staff have concluded MB Power is compliant with CNSC Reg Doc 2.4.2 and all safety goal limits are met for Point Lepreau. Furthermore, MB Power must submit the next PSA update in April of 2022 in accordance with the 5-year review cycle. This table shows the Level 1 and Level 2 PSA results from both 2008 and 2016. As shown by the bolded total, which is a simple summation of the total at power and the total at shutdown, all safety goal limits are met. CMD 17-H2 provides more information about the values presented in this table and their safety significance. The definition of safety goals is included in the licensing basis. The safety goal limit represents the limit of tolerability of risk above which actions must be taken to reduce the risk. The safety goal target is set one order of magnitude lower and represents the desired objective towards which the facility should strive, provided that measures to further reduce the risk are cost effective. In the event the target is exceeded, the licensee develops a plan to assess the potential safety improvement opportunities and determine if the plant changes are warranted. Tracking implementation of the proposed licensee actions occurs through ongoing compliance verification activities, such as opening an action item and the conduct of inspections. MB Power also completed a PSA-based seismic margin assessment, known as a PSA-based SMA, to evaluate the impact of seismic events on structures, systems, and components. MB Power submitted its methodology in June of 2016, and CNSC staff concluded it was acceptable and met regulatory requirements. MB Power completed its PSA-based SMA using the accepted methodology and submitted the Level 1 and Level 2 assessments in June and September of 2016. The PSA-based SMA were reviewed and accepted by CNSC staff in April of 2017. The results are compared to a review level earthquake, which is defined as an earthquake with an equivalent return period of 10,000 years. The results indicate the Point Lepreau generating station meets the review level earthquake. The change in severe core damage frequency from 0.3 G in 2008 to 0.344 G in 2016 is caused by improvements in model pathways and weighting factors, as well as updated input data. The large release frequency decreased from 0.42 G in 2008 to 0.35 G in 2016, as the updated study identified a structural weakness related to a non-safety significant fixture in the main control room. MB Power is currently assessing this weakness to determine the appropriate remedial actions. CNSC staff is satisfied that severe core damage and large release frequencies meet the review level earthquake of 0.344 G, representing a 1 in 10,000 year earthquake. Although MB Power meets the safety requirements associated with a review level earthquake, MB Power is assessing the need for corrective actions to increase the high confidence and low probability of failure for a large release frequency. The safety report referenced in the current LCH was submitted in December of 2012 and reviewed and accepted by CNSC staff in April of 2014. This safety report demonstrates that adequate safety margins are in place at Point Lepreau. A safety report update was submitted by MB Power in 2016. CNSC staff have completed the review of the safety report updates and accepted the report in April of 2017. MB Power must submit the next safety report update in April of 2022 in accordance with the 5-year review cycle. MB Power has comprehensive emergency plans in place to respond to emergencies and to provide support to off-site authorities. MB Power's plans and programs meet current CNSC regulatory requirements, and an implementation plan for Reg Doc 210.1 is required by September 30th of this year. Program updates to the Emergency Preparedness and Fire Protection Program include the transition to a dedicated full-time fire brigade and the procurement of new equipment such as emergency mitigating equipment, radiation monitoring equipment, and additional firefighting equipment. In addition, MB Power has installed an automated remote gamma monitoring system at the site fence and has completed the implementation and training on Severe Accident Management Guidelines, also known as SAMG. New Brunswick Emergency Measures Organization, referred to as MBEMO, is responsible for the implementation of the Provincial Off-Site Nuclear Emergency Plan. The Off-Site Plan builds upon the province's All-Hazard Incident Command System, which allows the response organization to expand or contract based on the consequences of the accident. The Provincial Off-Site Plan is aligned with national and international recommendations and guidance. In addition to having a comprehensive technical planning basis for the Off-Site Plan, MB Power and MBEMO regularly test these arrangements in full-scale exercises. During Exercise Intrepid in 2015, MB Power and MBEMO demonstrated the current response arrangements can effectively deal with a severe accident. Point Lepreau activated its emergency response organizations during the exercise and demonstrated its ability to effectively respond to the emergency. MBEMO activated its off-site nuclear emergency plan and demonstrated its ability to effectively implement a coordinated multi-agency response in the unlikely event of a radiological release from the Point Lepreau facility. Public alerting, communication, and interoperability were successfully demonstrated. The exercise also included participation of the public, with over 200 residents performing an actual evacuation. In addition to the full-scale response exercise held in 2015, and the previous exercise completed in 2012, MBEMO held a recovery exercise in 2017 with provincial and federal partners. In addition, MB Power has an exercise plan for next year entitled Synergy Challenge 2018. CNSC staff will be present during this exercise. CNSC staff observed effective integration and implementation of emergency response plans during all exercises. CNSC staff concludes that all reviewed plans have the required linkages to ensure harmonizations of the plans, and that both MB Power and MBEMO have comprehensive emergency arrangements in place to protect the public. Please note that MBEMO is with us today and are available to answer any questions. MB Power holds a single license which includes the operation of a solid radioactive waste management facility known as the SRW-MF, located on the Point Lepreau site. The SRW-MF is comprised of 3 phases or sites. Low and intermediate operational waste is stored in Phase 1 of the facility. Phase 2 is a dry storage facility for spent fuel. And Phase 3 of the facility stores waste generated during the refurbishment of Point Lepreau. Waste is safely transferred from the Point Lepreau station and stored at the waste facility in accordance with CNSC regulatory requirements. Some low-level waste, such as rags, paper, and gloves, are transported to the United States for incineration and returned to Point Lepreau for final storage. MB Power has implemented and maintained an effective program that promotes minimization, segregation, and proper handling and storage of waste. CNSC staff concludes that MB Power Waste Management Program meets regulatory requirements. MB Power submitted a revised preliminary decommissioning plan and decommissioning cost study in June of 2015. CNSC staff reviewed these submissions and concluded they met CNSC regulatory requirements. MB Power is responsible for the cost of the future decommissioning of the Point Lepreau site and waste storage facilities and must maintain a financial guarantee which is acceptable to the Commission. The financial guarantee covers the cost of decommissioning the entire site as well as the life cycle management of all waste generated from ongoing operations. The current MB Power financial guarantee meets regulatory requirements. The preliminary decommissioning plan anticipates commercial operations to cease in 2040 and the site to be decommissioned and available for other industrial uses by 2081. The release criteria for a license to abandon include all radioactive contamination in excess of the established clearance levels and all other hazardous materials to be removed from the site. All the facility systems must be dismantled, and all the structures and land areas are decontaminated. In accordance with regulatory requirements, MB Power must obtain approval from the Commission prior to decommissioning. MB Power currently meets all CNSC regulatory requirements for environmental protection. Environmental protection covers programs and processes that identify, control, and monitor all releases of nuclear and hazardous substances and effects on the environment from the Point Lepreau site. Important environmental protection programs include the Effluent Control Program, Environmental Monitoring, and the Environmental Management System. Supplemental CMD 17H2B was submitted by CNSC staff to the Commission on April 26, 2017. The supplemental CMD includes the new 2016 data from the CNSC's Independent Environmental Monitoring Program, known as the IEMP. Samples taken included beets, zucchini, clams, and surface water from local residents. In 2016, the 2016 results were also posted on the CNSC website. The 2016 IEMP results remained well below guidelines and CNSC reference levels. The supplemental CMD also includes the status of the Fisheries Act authorization, which will be discussed later in this presentation, and the CNSC staff's review of the updated environmental risk assessment. The new information does not change CNSC staff conclusions of CMD 17H2 or the EA report that MB Power has and continues to make adequate provision for the protection of the environment and the health of persons. The 3 radionuclides shown here are the highest contribution to public dose from airborne releases. As shown, the 2015 total airborne releases are well below the derived release limits set in the LCH. Derived release limits, known as DRLs, are required for the purpose of protecting members of the public from radionuclides released into the environment during the normal operation of Point Lepreau. DRLs have been developed by MB Power in accordance with CSA standard N288.1. CNSC staff reviewed and accepted the DRLs, which are included in the proposed LCH. Furthermore, the maximum weekly release was also below the action levels set in the proposed LCH is 1% of the weekly DRL. Action levels are precautionary levels set well below DRLs for radionuclides released via airborne and waterborne pathways. In the event an action level is exceeded, the licensee must notify the CNSC, conduct an investigation to identify the cause, determine if a loss of control occurred, and implement appropriate corrective actions. The 2 radionuclides and gross beta gamma shown here are the highest contribution of public dose from waterborne releases. As shown, the 2015 waterborne releases are well below the DRLs set in the LCH. Furthermore, the maximum monthly release was also below the action level set in the proposed LCH as 1% of the monthly DRL. Please note there is an error in the table, and the second column should read 2015 total waterborne releases. The annual maximum effective dose has been well below the CNSC's regulatory dose limit of 1 millisievert a year from 2012 to 2015. The maximum dose for 2016 will be presented to the Commission in the Regulatory Oversight Report for Canadian MPPs. MB Power has a radiological environmental monitoring program that monitors point Lepreau releases to the environment and determines the dose to the public based on monitoring results and sampling of local produce, fish, seafood, vegetation, and well water from local residents. The current ecological effects review and human health risk assessment were conducted prior to the refurbishment of Point Lepreau. MB Power submitted a revised environmental risk assessment in June of 2015 and an updated version in January of 2017, which included additional information on thermal discharges. The ERA has been reviewed and accepted by CNSC staff and is publicly available upon request. CNSC staff conclude that the environment and human health remain protected around the Point Lepreau site. The updated ERA is part of continuous improvement and supports the implementation of a number of N288 series standards to be completed in accordance with the proposed LCH. Information accepted by CNSC staff from the June 2015 ERA, as well as additional information submitted in the updated assessments, was summarized in the CNSC's EA report. I will now turn our attention to other matters of regulatory interest related to the MB Power license renewal application for Point Lepreau. CNSC staff identified 18 First Nations and organizations based on potential interest in the license renewal for the Point Lepreau site, as it is located within their treaty lands and/or asserted traditional territories. Appendix F of CMD 17-H2 shows a map of the Atlantic Region Aboriginal communities. In October of 2016, CNSC staff sent letters of notification to all identified First Nations and organizations and completed follow-up phone calls. Follow-up information, including CMD 17H2, were sent to identified First Nations and organizations in January of 2017. In December of 2016, 2 First Nations and 2 organizations were awarded approximately $65,000 through the CNSC's Participant Funding Program to participate in Part 2 of the Commission hearing. It should be noted that the 2 organizations are representing a total of 15 First Nations in New Brunswick. 4 oral interventions were received from the 2 First Nations and 2 organizations, fulfilling their obligations for participant funding. Since the notification letters were sent in October of 2016, CNSC staff have offered interested First Nations and organizations to meet in person or via teleconference. Since January of 2017, CNSC staff have met with each of the First Nations and organizations intervening in this hearing. CNSC engagement with First Nations and organizations is an ongoing process not limited to this license renewal application. CNSC staff are committed to working with MB Power and interested First Nations and organizations to address all concerns raised. On February 2nd, 2017, CNSC staff held a CNSC 101 information session in St. John, New Brunswick. The open house was attended by 12 members of the public, including a First Nation organization. The open house provided an opportunity for CNSC staff to engage with the local communities and answer any questions. The Canadian Environmental Law Association and Conservation Council for New Brunswick applied as a single recipient and was awarded approximately $9,000 through the Participant Funding Program to participate in the Part 2 hearing. In total, the CNSC received 91 interventions from local residents, businesses, and educational institutions, as well as non-governmental organizations and representatives from various levels of government. 56 interventions were filed as written submissions, with an additional 35 oral submissions to be heard during Part 2 of this hearing. This Part 2 hearing is being conducted in the host community of St. John's to promote public participation in the Commission hearing process. The CNSC is committed to being an open and transparent regulator. In April 2016, MB Power submitted a preliminary self-assessment to determine the requirement for a Fisheries Act authorization. CNSC staff reviewed the self-assessment and requested MB Power submit additional information. The revised self-assessment was submitted in January of 2017, and CNSC staff have confirmed the acceptability of the data presented by MB Power and the conclusions that a Fisheries Act authorization is required. Much of the technical data in the self-assessment will eventually go into the application itself. The next steps in obtaining a Fisheries Act authorization will include quantifying the benefits of MB Power's proposed offsets and performing Aboriginal engagement on this matter. These are both requirements of the application itself set by Fisheries and Oceans Canada. The future application is expected to have the Aboriginal groups' feedback incorporated and details of what the groups have raised as concerns, including how these concerns were addressed. Timelines for MB Power submitting a Fisheries Act authorization application depend on how long this engagement takes. However, MB Power anticipates submitting an application by the fall of 2017. CNSC staff conclude that there are no issues that impact the licensing process under the Nuclear Safety and Control Act, and the issuance of a power reactor operating license by the Commission does not limit the ability of DFO to fulfill its mandate under the Fisheries Act. To monitor closure of remaining actions associated with the Fukushima action items, CNSC staff raised station-specific action items in 2016. Overall, CNSC staff are satisfied that MB Power has strengthened reactor defense in depth and enhanced its emergency response capabilities to respond to a Fukushima event. CMD 17H2 describes 5 remaining station-specific action items that were being addressed by MB Power. Since the time of writing the CMD, MB Power has closed 3 of the remaining items related to the evaluation of compensatory measures concerning malevolent aircraft impact, verification of a real-time boundary monitoring system, and implementation of additional coolant makeup provisions. I will now provide a brief update on the remaining 2 actions and their current status. In relation to the evaluation of the emergency response to malevolent aircraft impact, MB Power submitted a closure request for the remaining activity in April of 2017. The closure request is currently under review by CNSC staff. MB Power also submitted its habitability assessment in 2016, which underwent review by CNSC staff. MB Power is currently implementing the remaining design improvements, including portable filtered air supply system, commissioning of an exhaust fan, and the inspection of the building to apply and/or replace sealants as necessary due to degradation. The latest schedule from MB Power indicates all remaining activities associated with this action item to be closed by September of 2017. CNSC staff continue to monitor remaining actions through ongoing compliance verification activities and will report to the Commission through the Regulatory Oversight Report for Canadian MPPs. I will now briefly discuss the proposed license and license conditions handbook. Part 2 of CMD 17H2 contains CNSC staff's proposed power reactor operating license and license conditions handbook. CNSC staff are recommending the license be reviewed for a period of 5 years as captured in the proposed license. The proposed license condition handbook contains the detailed compliance verification criteria used by CNSC staff to ensure compliance with each license condition of the proposed operating license. The proposed license conditions handbook also includes guidance for MB Power, such as standards and guidelines that are not regulatory requirements, but may include best practices that should be considered in normal operations. MB Power is compliant with current regulatory requirements. Since 2012, many new or revised CNSC regulatory documents and CSA standards have been updated. MB Power has performed gap analyses and provided transition plans with implementation dates. Implementation dates have been accepted by CNSC staff and are captured in the proposed license conditions handbook. CNSC staff will update the Commission via the annual Regulatory Oversight Report for Canadian MPPs. In the meantime, MB Power has adequate measures in place for all safety and control areas. In total, a total of 19 new or revised CNSC Reg Docs and CSA standards have been added as updated requirements in the proposed License Conditions Handbook. This means that the current requirements are being replaced by a newer version of a Reg Doc or CSA standard in the spirit of continuous improvement. As shown on this slide, there are 10 new or revised CNSC Reg Docs that are being proposed as updated requirements to be implemented by July 31st of 2017. The implementation dates listed were accepted by CNSC staff, and as shown in this table, 9 out of the 10 Reg Docs will be fully implemented by the date of the issuance of the proposed license on July 1st, 2017. In addition to the CNSC Reg Docs, there are also 9 new and revised CSA standards being proposed for inclusion in the License Conditions Handbook. The implementation dates are listed in this slide, with most standards fully implemented when the proposed license and License Condition Handbook come into effect. CNSC staff will continue to monitor and update the Commission via the Regulatory Oversight Report on the progress of these continuous improvement activities. Furthermore, these annual updates will also include the implementation of new and revised Reg Docs and standards identified on a continuous basis during the proposed license period. I will now pass the presentation over to Mr. Jerry Frappier for the CNSC staff's overall conclusions and recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Casterton. Based on the assessment of New Brunswick Power's safety performance at Point Lepreau, CNSC staff conclude that as per Section 24(4) of the Nuclear Safety and Control Act, the New Brunswick Power is qualified to carry out the activities authorized by the license, and in carrying out the licensed activities, New Brunswick Power has made and will continue to make adequate provisions for the protection of the environment, the health and safety of persons, and the maintenance of national security, and measures required to implement international obligations to which Canada has agreed. CNSC staff recommend that the Commission accept CNSC staff conclusions and recommendations presented in CMD 17H2 and exercise its authority under the Nuclear Safety and Control Act to renew the license to authorize New Brunswick Power to continue to operate the Point Lepreau Nuclear Generating Station from July 1st, 2017 to June 30th, 2022. CNSC staff also recommend that the Commission authorize the delegation of authority as indicated in License Condition 3.2 for reactor restart following a serious process failure, and License Condition 16.2 for the extension of the SRWMF. Both of these license conditions are also captured in the current power reactor operating license for Point Lepreau. So with that, thank you, Mr. President, members of the Commission. CNSC staff present here and in Ottawa are prepared to respond to any questions you may have.
Thank you.